Okay.
All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and move into our main topic then. And to start things off, I thought it would be kind of good to just give some background for the listeners as to what our, I don't know, whenever we present things, obviously we do research and stuff, but there's a few topics I think that tend to make people nervous. And so in this case, I thought it would be good to just give some background on what our knowledge level is so that our listeners have some idea of like how much faith they want to put into this show. And I know that there's also a lot of self-proclaimed firearm experts on the internet. Some of them are just keyboard warriors that spend all day playing Call of Duty in mom's basement. Some of them actually are experts on the topic. Some maybe both. I think both of us are probably somewhere in the middle. So let's just go through that. How would you rate your knowledge level and experience on this subject, and where does that experience come from?
All right. I have to admit, you are probably a lot more of an expert on this subject than I am. Um, my earliest memory of shooting, I think I was 5 years old, shooting rifles with my uncle and my father. Um, I did a little bit of Boy Scouts. I never was a good enough shot to get the merit badge, but I did have to show that I knew how to be around a gun and be quasi competent at it. I have shot trap shooting at many ranges. That's one of my favorite things to do as far as shooting goes. Also, decent shot with a rifle. I hate pistols with a passion. I could hit maybe the broadside of a barn if I really tried. I suck at those. I find it enjoyable. I personally, I am going to go into this. It scares me how easily obtainable some of these things are, but I am not afraid of the weapon itself. Um, so I'll put that out there. Just so as far as a rating of 1 to 10, one being a complete and utter novice, 10 being an expert, I'd put myself at about a 4 or a 5.
Okay, cool. So my first experience with a firearm was when I was about 8 years old with our grandfather and hunting pot guts with a 22. Pot guts are little like ground squirrel type things that are native to the desert. And then when I was age, I think I was technically 11 at the time, in the Boy Scouts, and I went to scout camp. I was allowed to go at age 11 because my dad was the leader. So I completed the rifle shooting and the shotgun shooting merit badges. And then obviously I've done various hunting trips about every year or every other year sometimes, just depending on lottery results, for about the last 20 years. Also, when I was younger, our church congregation had an annual skeet shooting competition, shooting shotguns at clay targets. So I did that every year. And then as far as like actual formal training, I've done the state of Utah hunter education and shooting course, the NRA basic pistol, basic rifle, and basic shotgun courses. Also, a company in Nevada called Front Sight. I've done their 4-day defensive handgun and 4-day practical rifle. I was able to achieve expert marksman rating on the M4 carbine and M9 pistol. Also have taken the NRA defensive pistol and the NRA range safety officer courses. So I'm fairly confident in my knowledge about gun safety. And then I've also done a few armor gunsmithing courses for Glock and SIG, or from Glock and SIG rather. And then most recently, when I moved, I did the Idaho State Enhanced Concealed Weapons course, just because I moved states. So on a 1 to 10, I would say, I mean, I've done a lot of courses, but I also don't practice much, so I'm going to say a 7 or an 8, probably a 7.5. So
there you go. Go to Adam for all your firearms knowledge.
Well,
I'd much rather shoot a bow.
I do have experience, but I will be the first to say that I'm still not an expert. So, but that'll kind of give you an idea of where we're coming from, just so you could kind of gauge things. And so from there, we kind of wanted this to be fairly like broad. Didn't really want to go into too much depth, and honestly, we don't know like the proficiency or familiarity of our listeners, so we just wanted to kind of keep things basic. Obviously, there's many different categories, different styles of firearms, and I found that a good place to start is understanding what sets them apart from each other. They can be distinguished in a couple of different ways. The most useful that I found is to divide them up by the type of action that they use, which kind of tells you how they work. Also, we can look at the method of propellant, and then by like the category or the form factor of firearm that they are. So first, I think a good place to start is the type of propellant. You want to take us through that?
Yeah. So the first is type of propellant or thing that will take that bullet or ball or whatever you're shooting from the gun to the target, is black powder. This is a very coarse powder. It was and still is used for muzzle-loaded firearms. Your muzzle loaders are going to be like your muskets. Think Napoleonic Wars, American Revolution, that type of thing. It's generally measured out before each shot, poured down the barrel, sometimes wrapped in a paper cartridge or a wad, a few at a time. No, the wad is different. Plug, right?
I don't know that it has a technical term. I think
Okay.
I've always heard it called a patch.
Patch. I'm trying to remember because this was one of my father's like most prized possession was his muzzleloader black powder. So
Okay. Yeah, it was probably
Yeah.
like a little cloth patch.
Mm-hmm. It's slower burning compared to a smokeless powder, and sometimes results in a hang fire. And that's when it doesn't fire, right?
Yeah, that's when you pull the trigger and maybe the cap will go off, but the powder will either not fire or it'll burn really slow and then fire like a few seconds later.
Cool. After going through the notes on this, I'm going to take myself from a 4 to a 3.
You're fine.
The next type of propellant, and this is probably the most common one that you will find, is smokeless powder. This is a modern gunpowder. It's very fine, highly explosive, and fast burning. So this is, like I said, it's modern. It's found in all modern cartridges. It's loaded into metal or plastic casing behind the projectile. So this is your classic bullet. Casing's the thing that holds the powder. Projectile is your bullet. Usually has a firing cap or something inside the casing. I don't know if we're going over that later because I didn't really look into the notes. Sorry, Adam.
It's all good. Actually, I'm going to interject because I do have a couple things we can look at really quick on this other camera.
Okay.
So that we don't have to come back. Just specifically talking about the propellant and things. So if you take a look here, So this is the brass casing and the lead bullet. This is referred to as a full metal jacket bullet, which means it's covered in copper. And this is the gunpowder that's used by this cartridge. So this is a 5.56 rifle cartridge. This is what is shot out of an AR-15. And then for a look at the shotgun, so the shotgun's a little bit different. So the gunpowder's the same, it's a little bit more coarse, but you have a plastic shell, and then in the shotgun you have a plastic wad that sits in front of the powder, and then you have the lead BBs that sit inside that plastic cup. So that'll just help visualize it a little bit while we're talking about propellants and cartridges and stuff.
Cool. Another reason to come to the live show. You're not going to get that on the podcast.
Nope. You get pictures if I remember to upload them in the show notes, but that doesn't always happen.
Right. The last type of propellant that we're going to mention today is called pneumatic, and this is compressed air. Air rifles, pellet guns, BB guns. Some sports shooting guns use this, like a little CO2 cartridge. You'll see that quite often.
Mm-hmm.
There are some high-powered air rifles and shotguns that can be used for hunting, but it's generally not that reliable. Some individuals who are not legally allowed to own firearms use these for hunting, depending on the laws of their state. I apologize. I have no idea what's going on. For this discussion, however, we'll mostly be focusing on non-pneumatic firearms, as they vary less and are more uniformly regulated.
Okay. So let's move on now to the different types of action that firearms use. So the word action is a specific word in this industry that refers to the methodology used by the operator when they're physically manipulating the firearm to load, fire, and unload a projectile. And there's three main types of action. So the one that a lot of people are familiar with is automatic or fully automatic. This means that the weapon fires 2 or more rounds per trigger activation. And I'm specifically saying trigger activation rather than trigger pull because not all guns have a trigger that you pull. Some of them have like a push button. There's different types depending on what they are. So 2 or more rounds per trigger activation. Generally, these weapons will continue firing until the magazine is empty, or they can also be configured to fire a 3 to 5 round burst for each trigger activation. These are sometimes referred to as Class 3 firearms. They are very tightly regulated and very expensive, on the order of tens of thousands of dollars. These can be owned by private citizens, but it requires filling out forms with the ATF, approvals from local law enforcement, as well as federal, and also paying for an expensive tax stamp. Yes, just like in colonial times, an actual tax stamp. In addition, civilian ownership of fully automatic weapons is limited to weapons that were made prior to May 19th, 1986, which is when the Hughes Amendment to the NFA, National Firearms Act, closed the registry of new automatic weapons. So what that means is today, all legally civilian-owned fully automatic weapons in existence were manufactured before that date. So
I would like to interject that when we were talking about the different forms and everything, we are talking about U.S. law. not
Yes, yeah.
international.
I have no clue about international firearm laws or the lack thereof. So this, yeah, that's a good caveat. This is all very heavily geared towards U.S. as far as like the legality and stuff.
I do know that the most armed country in the world is technically Switzerland. That's
Nice.
a bit of trivia for you.
All right. So that covers automatic weapons. The next category is semi-automatic. This is actually the most common type of firearm in the U.S. by far. And sometimes they are referred to incorrectly. So a semi-automatic weapon means that you have exactly one round fired per activation of the trigger. You can hold the trigger down, but no additional rounds are fired. Semi-automatic weapons come in various shapes, calibers, magazine capacities, but again, by far this is the most popular. Everything from like a Glock 9mm pistol to an AR-15, all of those are semi-automatic. And the last type of action, I'm kind of grouping a few different things and calling it single action. So this can be like bolt action, lever action, brake action, etc. These also allow one round per trigger activation, but it doesn't automatically eject the spent casing and reload a fresh cartridge between trigger pulls. So if you think of like a lever action, that's kind of like your Old West cowboy style gun where there's a lever on the bottom of the rifle and you pull it out and back in. Brake action is what you see with skeet and trap shooting in the Olympics, where the shotgun kind of breaks in half and they put the shells in there. But a couple characteristics that all of these firearms have, they tend to be more accurate because there's no movement of the action during firing. The action remains closed. There's no round ejecting. Everything is static until you manually eject the round. They also have higher recoil. In semi-automatic and automatic firearms, a large portion of the recoil is converted into the motion required to cycle the next round. So like your high-powered hunting rifles, high-powered shotguns, they do kick into your shoulder a lot more, so it's not always ideal for small-framed users.
One of my favorite vines was somebody who's never shot one, shooting it and knocking him on his butt. I don't know why. I just think it's funny.
Yeah.
Mostly because that was probably me when I was younger. The next categories that we're going to look at is, I guess, categories.
Yeah, I couldn't think of a really good name for this category, form factor, whatever.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah. The first category of firearm is called smoothbore. These firearms are very uncommon today. They generally refer to the old muzzle loaders, muskets, pistols, but the technical definition is a firearm. Why is that so hard for me to say today? With no rifling grooves, hence the name. For those of you that don't know, rifling is a spiraling that goes down the barrel. It makes the bullets spin, so you have a little bit more accuracy. Modern day muzzle loaders are usually not in this category, since most of them do have rifling. Today they are either used by historical reenactors, history buffs, or their modern equivalent is used to hunt, as they typically have a different season that doesn't compete with the general rifle hunt.
Yep.
After smoothbore, we have rifles. There's two types of rifles, rimfire. This refers to the type of firing pin system used. Rimfire has a firing pin that impacts the edge of the rim at the base of a cartridge. Most 22 caliber rifles are rimfire rifles. They tend to be low power, not useful for hunting or anything larger than rabbits or squirrels. And then there's a center fire, also refers to the type of firing pin system. These have a central primer embedded at the base of the cartridge case that ignites the powder when struck. Most modern cartridges, whether rifle or handgun, use this type of system. Do you want to take this next two, or do you want me to keep going?
Oh, I can go. That's fine.
Oh,
So shotguns. Shotguns are a type of long gun. The defining characteristic is they usually fire a group of metal pellets, like I showed a little bit ago with all the BBs. The pellets can vary in diameter depending on the use case. The pellets are contained within a plastic shell with the end crimped shut. Shotgun bore size is measured in gauge rather than caliber, and the smaller the number means the larger the barrel diameter. With other guns, and measured in caliber, it's opposite. So popular gauges of shotguns include 12, 20, 10, and 410. Shotgun shells are very diverse. They can have lots of different loads depending on their use. Birdshot, buckshot, deer slugs, and then a whole category of less lethal options, including gas canisters, bean bags, all sorts of stuff. And then getting into handguns, generally they are divided into two different categories, revolvers and pistols. A revolver is so-called because of the revolving cylinder in the middle of the gun that holds the cartridges. It's generally an older technology, holds fewer rounds, and some more safety concerns. However, there are still revolvers made today. And then a semi-automatic pistol. There are technically a few automatic pistols, such as the Glock Model 18. Most of these are classified as a personal defense weapon or a submachine gun, though. So the semi-automatic pistol is by far the most popular type of firearm in America. And of these, 9mm is the most popular caliber.
excellent.
Did I miss anything there? Or anything
No,
else?
I did have some questions. Different types of shot for a shotgun. Like, I assume bird shots for birds.
Mm-hmm. And that's the one that I showed. That was birdshot.
Yep. What's the difference between buckshot and deer slugs?
So buckshot has, I forget how many are in there. They're large metal pellets, usually about the size of a 9mm bullet. I want to say there's like 7 or 8 in a 12 gauge cartridge. And then a deer slug is actually just one solid chunk of lead that is as wide as whatever the gauge of your shotgun is. So a 12 gauge deer slug is just a 12 gauge chunk of lead, just a solid piece of lead that it shoots. So very slow moving and very high energy.
Yeah, I've always had that curiosity. I've only shot birdshot because I do a lot of, well, when I shoot, I enjoy trap shooting. So
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Where did we want to go next? Sorry.
So next I wanted to, this is mostly going to be for the people either watching live or on the live stream. I just wanted to go over a few of the most common models and just show some examples of them. I know for people that are apprehensive about these, it's good to see an example of what they look like. And also for people that are firearm enthusiasts, it's always fun to look at, what somebody else has. So the first one that I have is, and these have all just, I know people are going to come at me in the comments if I don't say this. There is no ammunition in the room that I'm sitting in. It's all locked in a safe in the other room. Also, these have all been safety checked by myself and then also by my wife, who has also had firearms training. And we're going to pause there because we lost Steve. So we will be right back.